Roll call, please.
Simone?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We're not getting us.
Can you hear me?
We can barely. We're getting feedback. Is everybody muted?
Okay, can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, but we're having a hard time hearing you fully. Just one moment, please. Could you try again, Simone?
Can you hear me now?
Much better, much better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take, do the roll call. Director White? Director White?
I'm here. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear anything.
I can hear you a little bit, thank you. Director Todd?
He is absent.
Director Silva?
I'm here.
Director Gasca?
Here.
Director Edelman?
I'm here.
Director Marcus?
I'm here.
Director Seymour?
Good afternoon, I'm present.
Director Linderman?
Simone, could you repeat that one more time?
Director Linderman?
So James Litterman is taking over for Michael for the county today. Yep.
I'm here. Thank you.
And Chair Solomon?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone except for Ken Todd is present. Item number 2, approval of agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
First by Gasca. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Edelman. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Great, thank you. Item number 3, public comment on items not on the agenda. We're reserving this time for public to address the TAC about matters not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of the TAC. Persons wishing to speak on specific agenda items should do so at the time specified for those items. We will allow for public comment during the meeting at each item. I'm looking for hands in the physical audience or the Zoom audience for public comment. If you don't know how to raise your hand on Zoom, you can also come on camera and wave at us. I don't see anyone on the phone. Okay, I'm not seeing any public comment. If there's late public comment, we will entertain that as well. Item number 4, GSA Partner Project updates. We are going to hear status of project and management actions that the GSA is currently implementing, as well as partners in the GSA giving us updates to projects. Eric, did you want to start or do you want to go with the TAC members first?
We can do TAC members first.
Okay, great. Deborah, how about we put you on the spot first? Anything from the Resource Conservation District? We are going to be talking about groundwater monitoring during the meeting. And then also, Director White and Edelman, you have been part of the TAC for the Mendocino County Water Agency, if there's anything you wanted to report back on that. Deborah, take it away.
I don't have anything to report from the RCD. Chair Solomon had asked me to talk a little bit about the water agency TAC to prioritize community water needs. And Sean, of course, you can chime in. There were 2 meetings that were convened to look at a list of community water needs spreadsheet that was developed initially in 2021. and then built upon since then of various community water needs throughout the county, not just in the jurisdiction of the GSA. The list was reviewed and then ranked according to 10 benefit criteria. I won't read them all, but and then each project was individually scored and weighted by importance by the TAC members. A group of 10, a list of 10 projects was arrived at as the top 10 unanimously at the second meeting, and then brought to the Public Health, Safety, and Resource Committee for consideration on February 27th, and then sent to the Board of Supervisors on March 28th. And the board accepted the list and directed EKI, which is the water agency consultants, to proceed with assisting with implementation on all 10 projects, prioritizing the first 5. And that is the last of my knowledge of it. Do you have an update beyond that?
I do, only because I was contacted after that list was finalized by Amir, who's working on implementing that list. And apparently, when the board met to go down the list, some of the things that we had put in the top 5, the partners that had put those PMAs or whatever in the list were like, oh, we're already doing it. So thanks, but we're done or whatever. So the list ratcheted down, I think. So the top 5 are now comprised of things that were like maybe in the 5, 8, or top 8 or so, since some of them were already in motion. But I only know because I think our source water protection was like 7 or 8, and it's now part of the 5 because some of the other ones were done.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Deborah or Sean regarding that? No? Okay. Adam, let's go to you. Any updates from the ag community or Redwood Valley County Water District?
From the ag community, that we have appointed Brandon Axel to represent us in the Russian River Water Forum, with Guinness McFadden as the alternate. I am on that forum as well, but as a water supplier. Redwood Valley, I don't have any big updates, just that we're still moving toward consolidation with all the water districts in the city of Ukiah. And we have grant money that we're waiting to upgrade our plant and pumps from the lake that we can't get to because the road to them is underwater.
Great, thank you. Javier, have you got anything you want to share today?
In regards to just what we've been doing, I guess, in regards to the
Anything that might
tribes.
pertain to the GSA or you'd
Well,
like us to know about?
I'm here primarily representing Ukiah just because of their location in the valley, but I have also been engaging the other tribes as well and reaching out to get some more participation, to get some more people here to weigh in on their impacts from this action, what they're also doing as far as groundwater. So, you know, and so I am working with the North Coast Resource Partnership and doing some engagement there, and there are some projects that we're assisting some tribes with, not necessarily here in the valley, but there are a couple. Redwood Valley is one that's interested in some groundwater recharge and maybe possible, you know, purple use or, you know, purple line use, reusing their water. So we're kind of working with technical assistance, trying to get them the help they need to get that. And downstream as well. So we're involved with down Russian River Valley as well. So there's some things going on there that there's a couple of groundwater recharge projects that we're looking into as well. So.
That's great, thank
But
you.
I did want to mention Ukiah is interested in, you know, participating at a tribal governmental level. There is, I know we've been asked to, you know, be part of the monitoring, groundwater monitoring efforts, and a lot of the information that we provide already goes to the state. So the tribe is interested in talking about that and how that would benefit them and how it would benefit the valley.
That's
So,
great. Thank you. I'm sure we'll talk more offline about that.
Yeah.
Eric?
Just want to remind everyone to speak as closely and clearly into the microphone as possible for those online so they can hear you loud and clear, just
Great.
for future.
Thank
that.
you. We'll go to Sean, and then we'll go online. We'll hear from Laurel, and then Dawn, and then James. Sean?
As far as PMAs go, I have been working with Amir on looking for grant opportunities to help secure more open space in the Western Hills. We have about 1,000 acres now, but there are some potential willing sellers. So it's exciting. We'll see what Amir can put together.
Great, thank you. I think I said Laurel next, and then Dawn.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I have 3 different things to report on. We have been doing discharge measurements at the 2 GSA gauges. Those are, one is at Forsyth Creek and one is on the West Fork at East Road. We did some measurements in December, but then we found out that the loggers were not being maintained. So Eric got on that and got a contract out with Larry Walker so that now they're supposed to be maintained. But we went out in April to do them again, and only one of the gauges was working. So we're going out tomorrow, and we're really hoping that both of the gauges are working. And we'll be doing a few more discharge measurements, to make sure that we have a pretty good set. So that's where that stands. Then on the Department of Conservation grant, which is the watershed coordinator for the Groundwater Basin watershed, we have just completed the 3rd installment of the watershed plan. You might remember that the first installment was identifying locations that would be appropriate for groundwater recharge facilities. The second part was revegetation projects on tributaries and a ranking of those. And then we just completed the fire and fuel loads section. So I'll be sending that out. Next one up is all about addressing agricultural water needs and what projects are needed for that. And we expect to have that one done in several months. Also under that grant, we are monitoring, I believe it is 4 or 5 groundwater wells. And of course, some stream flow gauges. Now, under the new grant for the Bureau of Reclamation, we have provided them a lot of information. They made us revise the scope of work, the schedule. We had to do a budget review and write this thing up called the justification. And we had to enroll in a lot of federal systems. And I emailed them to see if they might have a date they expect to release the agreement, but they have not responded yet. So I don't have a time frame for when that will start, but I expect it would be in the next month. And so that's everything we're doing.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Laurel. Eric, did you have something?
Yeah, Laurel, it sounds like there's been some changes to the scope and whatnot. So when you guys finalize that, do you mind sharing that with the GSA? And so we could be just in coordination of what's going
Are you
on
talking
with
about
that in the model?
The Bureau of Reclamation?
Yes, that one.
No, we didn't change the scope. You just have to do certain things.
Oh,
they
like
want.
for the final negotiation, whatnot?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you for
We aren't
clarifying.
changing the project. But
Great,
I would
thanks for that.
say, there is funding for a couple of groundwater monitoring probes. So if people have ideas about where those should be, we would like to hear them.
Excellent. I'm sure you and Eric can work on offline on that one. Thank you. Dawn, and then James.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Don.
So the Russian River Forum was mentioned, and that was part of a DWR, $2.1 million DWR grant that Sonoma Water received. There's also 2 other tasks associated with that grant, along with the Russian River Water Forum. One of the other tasks is an assessment of the diversion facilities at Potter Valley Project. evaluate what type of capital project modifications might be necessary for fish passage improvement and armoring those facilities or modifying those facilities to, in the future, be able to operate under a run-of-the-river type of operation, and in light of likely not having Scott Dam and Scott Dam and Lake Pillsbury as a sediment sink, so having much heavier sediment loads. So that was kicked off, and we were looking at the consultant visiting those facilities in mid-May for an assessment, and to ultimately move forward with 2 to 3 alternatives that will be taken to a 20 to 30% design. Those alternatives both include ones which would have Cape Horn Dam still in place, and then 1 or 2 alternatives, dam removed with redesigned diversion facilities. And then the second, the other task associated with the DWR grant is really a water resource evaluation of Potter Valley. How the valley might be able to continue its heritage under a run of the river where it would only have a seasonal diversion. So looking for water supply alternatives in the valley or where water could be stored on, using on-farm recharge, ASR, or even potential surface water sites that might be in the valley. And so those two tasks are moving forward right now also. And lastly, I'd mentioned the facility assessment for the diversion facility, for Potter Valley diversion facilities. Sonoma Water is currently preparing a grant application for a new program at the Bureau of Reclamation. It's a ecosystem restoration grant. It's brand new. The application is due June 1st, so we're hustling. It's a pretty hefty lift of what they're at, the type of information they're asking. But what we would, if we were awarded that grant, we would be using those funds to, first of all, form a stakeholder, like technical advisory committee, that would evaluate the 2 or 3 alternatives that are coming out of the DWR grant, and then based on a facilitated process, select one of those alternatives, and then use the funding to take one of those alternatives to a 60% design. And so that's what's going on right now.
Great, thank you, Don. Very informative. And James.
I would just add, we will be hoping that many of you might be willing to provide letters of support for that Bureau of Rec grant.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. That is on my to-do list. If you need more information about that, you can contact Don directly. And James, great to have you back. Do you have any updates from the county for us today?
No updates at this time. I'm just trying to get back up to speed with all the activities of GSA.
Great. Thank you. Anyone have any comments or questions regarding this item before we move on? Public comments? Eric? Oh, I'm sorry. I totally forgot. Any public comment so far on anything? And seeing none, Eric is going to give us his update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. So with regard to what the GSA is up to, we submitted a grant application back in December for DWR grant funds. We expect to hear back at the earliest being the end of June, and we're hoping for to hear as soon as we can, so that way we can be ready to move forward on several projects. One of them is the rate and fee study. So we did conduct interviews for the rate and fee study. We have met as an ad hoc, and we have made a pre-selection that we'll be providing as a recommendation to the board at the June 14th board meeting here at the Board of Supervisors chambers from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. on June 14th. And once we have that and we propose that to the board and the board approves the contract, that consultant will get started pretty much immediately. And they will be providing rate and fee services in addition to outreach and communication around that, with support from the GSA staff, being myself. In addition to that, we also have groundwater monitoring and surface water monitoring going on, as both Deborah from MCRCD and from CLSI with Laurel Marcus mentioned before. I'm fully aware there has been some issues with the stream gauges. LWA has made a trip out there before to address those issues. And from the recent, very recent measurements that we have going on, I will be talking to Laura today to make sure that if there are any other issues that we can get those addressed, so that we can continue doing monitoring into the next fiscal year. And as some of you may know, there's quite a bit of talk about there could be quite a bit more rain potentially, even in the next couple of months. And also there's going to be quite a bit of snowpack throughout the state. So we expect that there could be sufficient flows for quite some time. So we want to make sure we're doing monitoring to capture that as much as we can while we have that opportunity. And then we also are already thinking about reporting for next year for the annual report. And one of the agenda items today we'll be talking about is having LWA share with us a little bit about some of the monitoring network suggestions that they have based on the annual report and the data that was collected from and reported on from this annual report that we had recently for water year 2022. So other than that, exciting things to come, and we'll be touching a little bit more on some of these items throughout the rest of the agenda today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eric. And I realize I didn't provide any update from my district, Mendocino County Russian River Flood Control and Water Conservation Improvement District. In addition to being very active in the development of the water forum, which others have spoken about already, I'm also on the steering committee for the Upper Russian River Voluntary Water Sharing Program. This was implemented last year after a couple of years of a collaborative effort by stakeholders and the State Water Board staff. We were able to implement it for about 6 weeks before the Trans-Basin diversion flow reduced beyond the amount we could actually share water. We were working towards an implementation of the program this year. However, with the current conditions and the repeal of the drought proclamation from the governor, which does not allow the State Water Board to have emergency regulations in the Russian River, the power under which we were able to run the program is now not in place. So we are adapting the program. We are considering not having a program this year. Again, the conditions don't seem to need it, but to work towards an adaptation for next year and the future as needed. Other than that, I don't have anything else. Any public comment, online or in the room? Oh, I will just mention, Eric, in your report, I noticed you talked about the annual report in the written version of your report, and I just wanted to point out that annual report is now on the website if anyone would like to view it. Item 5, compliance process with Executive Order N-7-22. We're going to receive an update from staff on the status of the coordination effort with the county and legal counsel to comply with the executive order, and feedback received at the April 17th workshop held in person here in the Ukiah Valley. The TAC will discuss and provide feedback to staff on proposed interim process for the GSA board adoption. Eric, please take it away.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. Just really quick, can everyone see my screen online? Yes, perfect. Thank you. So really quickly, just want to set the context and then also point out that we do have in the audience Marlena from the County Environmental Health Services, and she's also been one of the main people at the county that GSA staff, being myself, have been coordinating with. And we recently had a workshop on April 17th where we shared with the community at Bar Mendocino Winery a little bit more about the executive order, sort of how it started off, being Executive Order N-722. There's two parts to that executive order that we must comply with. 9A is more focused on the GSA, and 9B is more focused on the county. But the well permitting process and the authority lies with the county, and so the GSA gets pulled in when necessary. And there has been an update to the executive order, which is described in the staff report here, which is on page 6 through, I think, 10 of the packet online. If you have access to that, I encourage you to read through it. And so Executive Order M323 made a couple of updates, and we described those updates. You can read a little bit more about that there. But the main thing I wanted to point out here is that the governor invited state agencies to send their recommendations to the governor. to basically take that into account and basically evaluating whether or not parts of or the entirety of the executive order is still applicable or not. That does not mean that this will go away. It just means that they're taking into consideration any recent rainfall and other things like that and feedback they may have received to look at the executive order and is it still relevant. But despite that, there's also pending legislation that's currently being discussed at the California legislature right now. There's two bills on the floor. The first one is AB 429 and the other one is AB 1562. AB 429 basically is the same thing as the executive order for the most part when it comes to 9A and 9B. It just is applying that to be a law that basically will say that the counties or the well permitting agencies in each area and the GSA should coordinate with 9A and 9B sort of take into account there. And that would apply to critically overdrafted basins. And then AB 1562 is basically the same thing, but it's focused on the high and medium priority basins being a part of that. So the main point there is that this may or may not go away. It all depends on what's going on. And I'm getting a call, sorry. Let me hang up on that. And so that's just the context setting. So at the workshop, we received a lot of great feedback. The main points of feedback that sort of came up were mostly related around, when a hydrologic study or pumping test should be warranted or not. And that is an understandable concern by the ag community, and it's also an understandable concern in general, because there's cost implications with that, there's time considerations with that. And so right now we do have a draft process, and I did update it a little bit more based on feedback we received and feedback from the county. So that you can find in the packet. But there's some other feedback here that we received from other basins, and that the main thing is that SGMA allows GSAs to consider doing metering, and it also has other considerations there in terms of tracking extraction on an annual basis. And it has to be done through a groundwater sustainability plan. Our current groundwater sustainability plan does highlight some of this, but not as explicitly as I think it could if the GSA board and the TAC feels that we need to go in that direction over time. So I just wanted to highlight that since that is something on the couple-year horizon for us to discuss and consider, so that way we can move towards looking at that and those options and how the GSA wants to be managing things in the long term. So with that said, I'm going to jump to really quick some of the considerations that we have from the feedback for the process. And then I wanted to pose just some questions to the TAC here today. And then that will be shared with the county because the county is going to be looking at taking this process on more and looking at coming up with a process over the next near horizon timeframe here with the GSA's input. And then the GSA in tandem will be looking at long-term, what do we want to be doing on our end for 9A, but also how we want to be managing the basin over time, pending the uncertainties that we know for Potter Valley project, et cetera. So I'm going to jump ahead really quick. There's several attachments in here, so if you want to dig into some of these information, it's all there for you if you want to jump in. So with that, we reviewed this draft process that we've been working with the county on developing. I kept it redlined so that you can sort of see what's been sort of added and what's sort of pending. And some of these things are fairly new based on the discussion that we had at the workshop. The main thing being adding language around and considering language around if a well has a state permitted underflow well and it's exclusively being used for that, to sort of look at that as a possible exemption, since that is a state permitted issue and not necessarily something on our end. Also looking at if a well is exclusively extracting surface water through a Russian River flood control diversion contract, and also looking that as a possible exclusion based on that scenario, and also looking at wells that have multiple uses, not just specifically for domestic, but also if it's multiple use, but it's less than 2 acre feet a year, what does that look like? And then also looking more at well failure due unforeseen circumstances and emergency situations, and sort of trying to take a stab at some of the parameters around distance of a well to neighboring wells, distance to nearby rivers, streams, and creeks, which could be GDE related, which is a very important thing for the GSA and the county to be considering. And then also a little bit more possibility and language around, when is a hydrologic study or pumping test really necessary, and what are some of those variables there? And we looked at what Sonoma has been doing to our neighbors down to the south, and because they're a little bit more ahead on this process, and so just looking to them for clues to look at some of that language and understanding the successes they've been having there. So this is a work in progress. This is not by any means a final version. This is just where we're currently at. And so with that, I would like to invite Marlena, if you have any particular comments, you're welcome to jump up to the microphone here if you would like to share anything. And then I'll pass it back to Chair Solomon.
Welcome, Marlena.
I think Eric summed it up pretty well. I think we'll be meeting next week with our council, so we'll get a lot more clarity there, because this is a really council-heavy response for the county. And I think we got some great feedback, and seeing where we can carve out reasonable waivers, exemptions, whatever you want to call them, looks like a doable for many of the concerns that the people were raising there. So that's all positive. I'm just here to be an active participant and partner as we move forward, working together more and more. And you're here in the building.
Great. I wouldn't go too far if I were you, because I think there might be a question. Sean, did you have a question for Marlena?
I just had a question about some of these bullets here, and I see the one where it's exclusively extracting water associated with the Russian River flood control diversion contract. I mean, lots of ag in the valley uses a well to access groundwater under the influence of surface water. It's a very common practice, but a lot of people also have already existing appropriative rights to do that aren't part of a flood control contract, and most of them use both, honestly. So why is there not a similar thing for people to just have existing rights to extract water?
No, that's a really good question, John. The short answer to that is because that goes down the water rights piece more, and looking at the perspectives of both sides, being the environmental and also being the ag, trying to balance how can we adequately address complying with 9A and 9B with or without hydrologic studies, and where do we draw the lines for those exemptions, and what does that look like? So this is sort of an initial pass at that. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot more nuances, as you just mentioned, that we need to dive into more, and because that tends to go down the side of some of the legality on that, that's where our council needs to be more engaged to help address, how do we balance both concerns on the ag and environmental side and show compliance for 9A and 9B.
I don't understand the difference, though. I mean, they're both appropriative rights that have already been approved by the state. So it's literally just the world's best fish screen, really, is all it is. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And flood control has a great water right, but in the end of the day, just another appropriative right. Yeah. And it would seem anybody with an existing approved appropriative right shouldn't be subject to another round of hydrologic studies. That's already been done. You know what I'm saying? They have an existing right. Flood control has an existing right. I don't know why one would have some privilege that others don't have. Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea for both, honestly. I'm just curious why that one is called out explicitly.
I wonder, Eric, could I just interject? Yeah. The bullet point above the one that refers to the flood control district, does that cover what, and maybe I'm not reading it to the level of refinement that you're talking about, Sean, but if we potentially added a little language to that maybe, to expand it?
I think Sean's main point is the exclusively word in there, right? Because you said there could be multiple uses and multiple rights being.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it should just be one bullet and say either an
Yeah, I
appropriate
agree.
right or a contract with Russian River Flood Control.
Well,
know
and
what
you
I
don't
mean?
even have to say the contract part because it's an appropriate right.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think we could combine those two.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would, that's great. I would suggest smashing them.
Could you
Yeah.
provide some draft language to Sean and I about that to kind of
Yeah,
go over
no, absolutely.
for the next round?
And as Marlena mentioned, we're going to be meeting next week to talk about this a little bit further, to take the feedback we got from April 17th workshop to go dive deeper into some of these details, and then to try to understand, okay, with all this feedback, what are the concerns that we need to address, and how do we craft this in a better way? This was just my best stab with Marlena's input to sort of explicitly call things out the best I could. But it may not fully capture some of the nuances, as you mentioned, with that.
Marlena, did you have anything to add to this issue?
No, it's something that we are planning on talking with them next week. Is there a way that we can be a little more general? If you're already under authority of the state permit, construction permit, can it still be issued ministerially and the 9B addressed under the overarching permit? So those are some of our questions that hopefully council will be able to make a clear call on.
Great. Sean, did that cover your question?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I think it'd just be more clear.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to the rest of the TAC
Eric,
members. Oh, is that Devin?
Yeah. Sorry.
Devin, did you have more to ask on?
You mind? I can wait.
Go ahead, Devin.
I just wanted to follow up really quickly. I apologize. This is Devin Bohr, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. I hopefully will be starting to be able to call in the future a little bit with actual face-to-face. I apologize. So yeah, to Sean's point, I mean, this has already come up, but we've already had some of our members with licensed underflow wells that have pulled permits stuck in the process now that aren't able to do well repairs to their surface water diversion, basically, because they're sort of stuck in this quagmire. So, Marlena, I would appreciate some clarification. And to Sean's point, I do agree. We're talking about appropriated water rights that are, being diverted and reported under surface water use. So, that would be great if we can get some clarification there. I just wanted to support that. Thank you.
Welcome back, Devin.
Great. Marlena, did you have a comment?
Just that it sounds reasonable. We are going to pursue that as far as we can with council's recommendations.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to open up the question, first of Eric's questions on his staff report. Scrolling back up, thank you. General feedback from the workshop on the revised well permit review process. So as Sean brought up his issue or this issue, does anyone else on the TAC have comments or questions regarding the revised well permit review process? We're going to hear from the TAC members first, and then we'll go to the public. I see a hand, but we will get to you, I promise. Adam, do you have anything?
I don't have any comments.
Javier, anything? Deborah, anything? Don Seymour, do you have any comments?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Laurel, anything from you?
No.
James?
No comment.
Okay, we'll open it up to, I think that was everybody on the TAC. I don't have any comments at the moment. So we'll open up to the public. I did see a hand up. Was it Susan? Please feel free to unmute yourself, Susan. Welcome.
Hi, yes, this is actually Paul Hansberry, Susan's partner.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you.
Hey, we're sharing a computer here. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on the mixed use for the under 2 acre feet per year. Say it's a small mom and pop that's, working in a farmer's market or other ag kind of thing, but they're not, for the smaller people, the people less. If you could expand a little bit more on that exclusion or exemption.
No, that's a great question. So it's referring to the language that's in the executive order, and I just scrolled up to it. which is, this paragraph shall not apply to permits for wells that will provide less than 2 acre feet of water per year of groundwater for individual domestic users. That is the language that's in the executive order. So with mixed use, if you have some like ag use with that as well, that is not explicitly called out in here. And so that is something that was brought up at the workshop is, well, let's say if I have a well that I'm using to, irrigate some crop that I have, but also it's domestic use and it's less than 2 acre feet a year. That was brought up as being something that we should consider as a possible exclusion. So that was the purpose of that in the context of the feedback we received, and the reason why that's being considered as a possible extra add-on of clarification, because the executive order calls out individual domestic users as that exemption in the executive order. But we're trying to explore, is there other scenarios, as someone brought up, that could also count for being less than 2 acre feet a year, and what would that look like, and can we exempt something like that?
Well, I guess what I was wondering is, how would you determine the usage if it's not metered?
That is a great question. And that actually goes to part of what I brought up before, which is that right now we are not monitoring that information, right? It's not being metered. And that's something that the GSA will have to consider as something that we might want to do in the future, to either monitor in a certain way, do metering in a certain way, monitoring usage. Right now, usage in general is captured as a whole in urban water management plans and whatnot, but is not captured at this level in terms of permitting. So that would be something that we would look to capture some of that data just initially as part of the process when we're reviewing permits. But as ongoing monitoring goes, that is currently not something that is being considered. But it is on our minds as how do we actually verify and look at, is someone pumping less than 2 acre feet a year, and what use is that for? So that's a very good point. And that was brought up at the workshop as well, as how are you monitoring that and tracking that information?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the question. Any further public comment in the room or on Zoom regarding general feedback from the workshop on the revised well permit review process? I'm not seeing any. Eric, do you have next steps on that you want to review, or you want to go on to question number 2?
We can go on to question number 2.
Okay, great. Eric's asking us, in the next GSP update, that's the Groundwater Sustainability Plan update, should the GSP or the plan be updated to make use of SGMA's section 10725.8? See, and am I right in recalling that is regarding metering? That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts of it. There is 10725.8A, which is looking at metering of groundwater extraction facilities or wells. And then there's 10725.8C, which is looking at requiring that groundwater extractors provide their annual extraction volumes every year. And so we can look at both of them, but the main question I wanted to focus on was the annual extraction volumes as a starting point.
And how are you proposing that extraction statement be, how would that be measured and submitted? What would be the format?
So there's a couple different ways that it could be considered. The first is that if we do land up going a metering phase or doing a metering approach for measuring that, we can have a metering program where we're measuring that flow at a certain point every year and having people or having people self-report what that measurement is. And then obviously we can have some level of oversight to, if they have a meter, we can look and verify that information. And if they don't have a meter, then we would have to be estimating what their extractions are based on the ET estimates, so we can try to get a general understanding of what volume they're pumping, especially if it's an ag type of situation. But the main important thing is that our GSP has to state that. If it doesn't state that, then we're not exercising using these part of the sigma as explicitly as we should.
Okay, and so to clarify, we would need to have, in the 5-year update of our GSP, that would need to be clarified.
Yeah, and that would need to be updated in the GSP.
Comments and questions? Sean? Oh, sorry.
The only comment I have is it would be great if it could be coordinated with other mandatory reporting, because I'll tell you right now, I report some of the same things, like, I'm not exaggerating, a half dozen times between the GSA, the state, et cetera, DDW. It just kind of goes on and on and on. And in the end of the day, they're all governmental agencies, and none of them seem to have the ability to develop some sort of universal place where it all gets reported. It would be amazing if we could start working together to just make it a singular place.
And that would be my hope too, that we can have a centralized, easy access information pool for everyone. And then obviously confidential information gets kept confidentially as well.
Deborah?
I just have a clarifying question, which is, are you suggesting putting the language in the GSP to have it available as an option or as a requirement?
That's a really good point. So that's part of the question today too, right? Do we feel the need to have it be a requirement or as an option? The way I see it is, in the short term, I think it's good to have as an option. And then over time, we should be developing our understanding and our basis of why we think it should be required and when. I think clearly defining that's really important. So that way we can have enough time to effectively communicate that and do outreach around that and get people's feedback on what they think. So that way we're as aligned with the community as possible, so we're not blindsiding anyone with this as a requirement when we don't necessarily have the need to do that yet, but understanding when that is needed and what that looks like with community input along the way.
Sure, answered? Question answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Eric, was this, I guess when I read it through the first time, I was under the impression that this would be for new wells because it was kind of discussing the permit, the new process. But are you saying that this would be for new wells only or all current and new wells?
We could define it as new or all,
Okay.
or anywhere in between.
So that's just another variable to discuss.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the one thing I will mention that I did bring up at the workshop, which I think is important, is that the future of the Potter Valley project really has a big impact on what happens within this basin in terms of groundwater use and pumping. So I think we have to be thinking long term, and that would be my recommendation to the TAC and the board as staff, is thinking long term about in what scenarios, based on what happens in Potter Valley or other factors, what do we do and what does that look like? And as part of a 5-year update, I think that having our GSP elaborate on that a little bit more and sort of defining that a little bit more would be extremely helpful.
Okay, great. I just want to go to the other TAC members, and Devin, I do see your hand up. Javier, Adam, do you have anything to add this time? Don, Laurel, James on Zoom, anything to add? Not seeing any? No? Okay, Devin, please take it away.
Okay. So just a quick question, Eric, in terms of, again, timing on this, because, a lot of the past conversations related to metering and tracking, groundwater use has also been connected to the rate and fee study, right? In terms of like what may ultimately come forward or what is being proposed within that structure. So, for example, Zach Robinson has passed ag rep, we've had conversations about using a acreage rate versus a, actual, acre foot rate. So, that's going to be part of this conversation as well in terms of sort of a mandated approach to metering, I guess. So just, I wanted to bring that forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Devin. And actually, thank you for bringing that up. So just a really quick refresher on the rate and fee study. There are 2 different possible routes, in generally speaking, and I'm not an expert on this, but just generally speaking, you could have something that is an extraction fee, and you can have something that's more of like a regulatory fee. If you do an extraction fee, obviously metering is more important in that case because you have to know what is being measured in order to impose a fee related to that. And then the other route could be something that's more generalized and spread out amongst everyone around the basin. So that way it's more of a baseline type of fee that can be used to fund GSA administration and planning and projects. And so as part of the rate and fee study, we will be looking at all these things as a whole and trying to develop a rate and fee structure that makes sense for all users in the basin, as well as providing the GSA the ability to function in the way it's intended to function over the time horizon that's noted in Sigma. And another layer to that, right, is the rate and fee study would probably happen within 1 to 2 years, starting in June. And so the timing of that is more or less aligned with the timing of when we need to start preparing and being ready to submit a updated GSP by 2027, if I recall correctly. And so we will be looking at everything in terms of the timing of the rate and fee study, what path we ultimately take, and then what projects will be tied into that, and then how are we incorporating that into our GSP update in 2027 to reflect all the most update information and what should be optional and then what should be required.
Devin, did you have further comment?
No, I apologize. I'll lower my hand. Thanks.
Okay, great. I see Jamie Neary has her hand up. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that we generally would really support inclusion of any metering requirements be included in the GSP. Just for there's so many different reasons. There's help just so you understand what the use is going on within the basin. It helps close data caps. It helps verification. Like Eric said, other GSAs are having issues with, especially with the 2 acre foot. And then it also really helps with just knowing what is going on with interconnected surface waters, and as Potter Valley begins to change and that begins to impact groundwater use more, knowing what those changes are will really help this board and this GSA respond to those changes more efficiently in a much more timely manner. And so we just would really like to see metering be required as part of any program going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jamie. You're saying we, I didn't know if you wanted to put on the record what agency you're representing. You don't have to, just one.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm with Russian Riverkeeper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the record. Great, I see Marlena at the dais.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up at the meeting, there was a big concern that the community thinks we have enough information, that we shouldn't need hydros because we are monitoring and we have enough monitoring data already, that we should have confidence. And I think there's a big disconnect in how much data we really need to have confidence when we talk about monitoring or metering. The county is not moving towards metering on our end at this time, but it is something that we need to address. How much data do we need? How do we want to go about getting it? How do we keep it transparent? Because the community really felt frustrated, as if it's going to be their burden to maintain. They brought up all the municipal water districts. What are they going to do? And I think there's just a disconnect in how much information is actually needed. And it would help our conversation with our community if we clarified that when you guys are talking about monitoring or metering.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Marlena. Thank you. And it kind of leans into the third discussion topic, which is voluntary groundwater well monitoring. And we did talk about that at our last GSA meeting a bit, which I was reviewing our minutes and remembering that several of us did support trying a voluntary pathway prior to a mandated one. Is there any further comment on the third discussion point, voluntary groundwater well monitoring program? Any comment on any of the discussion topics for this agenda? Okay, Eric, unless you have anything else, we can move on.
I just have a comment about the voluntary groundwater well monitoring program. I think that as part of the grant and the projects that we are going to hopefully be embarking upon very soon, we can dive into that a little bit more and try to roll that out in the near future if that becomes something that the TAC and the board feels it's an increasingly more urgent thing to do now versus later in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, I'm going to move on to item number 6. I think we're right on our time schedule, aren't we? GSA Monitoring Network. The TAC is going to receive recommendations from our associates at Larry Walker and Associates to update the GSA Monitoring Network in fiscal year 2024. We will discuss and provide feedback to staff and Larry Walker and Associates on proposed changes to the GSA Monitoring Network. I believe we have Audra and Laura here today from Larry Walker. Don't see anyone else from Larry Walker and Associates, welcome to you both.
Hello, thank you. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
thank you, Beth.
Thank you. I'll leave it to you.
All right, wonderful. So, Laura, do you want to give an introduction here?
Oh, you can just start. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Sounds great. So I just have a few slides here to summarize some of the changes that we would recommend based upon new wells that have been drilled, excuse me, and some information that came to light while we were completing the most recent GSP annual report, just like Eric had mentioned at the top of the meeting today. One more thing that we did want to mention as we're getting going here is that our technician who works on, the discharge monitoring for Russian River and for Forsyth Creek, he did visit those locations in March and replace the sensors, but he did let us know that some of the telemetry was not working, but hopefully both sensors should be operating. And Laurel, please do let us know if you encounter issues, vandalism, or any other problems when your team heads out tomorrow, and we'll get that addressed. But last we heard from Jeff, they should be functioning. And so we should be collecting raw data right now.
Thank you, Audrey.
Of course, yeah. And so again, we're happy to coordinate further if it's needed. All right. So as we all know, with the inception of the GSA and development of the GSP, there was very much an understanding that we wanted to go forth, expand our monitoring network in order to get more information, hopefully at higher time resolution. MCRCD has been amazing in that effort with some of their monthly field measurements they've been conducting in order to get a better handle on basin conditions and looking at some of our critical SMCs. So just a quick reminder of that and thinking about how, especially with the 2027 GSP update, we might go ahead and include future RMPs, refine some of the SMCs that have been identified for several of our sites. And so in looking at the basin and some of the locations we've been thinking about, I put together this map so that you can see a summary of what we're really keying in on today for you to consider and discuss among the board, or excuse me, among the TAC. So there were 5 DWR TSS funded wells that were drilled throughout the basin. You can see those demarked here with a black cross. Those are also measured by MCRCD. Not all of these sites are measured monthly, but they are part of the network that's visited by MCRCD. So 2 of these wells are nested and have up to 4 different casings that have been drilled at that location. So you can see these are distributed throughout the basin, and these seem like really good candidates for inclusion officially into our groundwater level monitoring network. These would not yet be considered MRP sites because we do not have a long enough record, of course, to identify SMCs for these sites. But Laura communicated with Eric the fact that this is something we should be able to do during pretty easily on the DWR website in between update to the GSP. So this is not something we have to wait to do until 2027. Another thing that came to our attention as we were updating, looking at our network and making updates for the water year 2022 annual report was the fact that one of the selected RMP well sites actually had been destroyed in 2018. So there were notes to that effect from DWR in the CASGEM database. And that is designated here with a red circle, right? Kind of mid-basin here. And I have some other maps too that give our full monitoring network to show some more context in a minute if people would like. And so we need to start thinking about how we might go ahead and swap out or replace another well existing in our monitoring network for that destroyed well. So the candidate that we are presently looking at is here also in mid-basin, approximately 1 mile from the destroyed well, and that's Ukiah Valley 36. So this has a record that dates back, I believe, until about mid 2015. So certainly not as long as the destroyed well, but we'll talk about why I think this might be a good candidate. And certainly, you know, we're looking for input, thought about this from the TAC. Okay, again, this is also, so here you can see a map that includes the full spectrum of the sites currently included in our groundwater level monitoring network. Okay, so here we can see RMP sites are designated with circles. And so by looking to this Ukiah Valley 36 site, it's not too close to any other existing RMP sites. It's also a mid-basin aquifer 2, the deeper aquifer. It's screened to that level. It is not a perfect match in terms of screening elevation within the basin, but it's not too far off. And again, we could add this in as a suggested RMP site to our official DWR network, and then in the update for 2027, identify SMCs for this location.
Audra, I think Laurel might have a clarifying question on that slide. Her hand is up.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, please, Laurel.
Could you go back to the prior slide?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just a little confused at what we're doing at these different wells because this says with continuous water level sensor, but you said that Deborah goes out and measures them.
Both.
Is that like a QA/QC practice against your continuous water level sensors?
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that, Laurel. I appreciate that. That's right. So these do have continuous data that's pushed out via telemetry. But Deborah does also periodically, and again, it's not monthly, but they do periodically also visit the site to kind of ground truth and calibrate.
It's great. And for the nested ones, you have a sensor in each one of these? Okay,
that's
so
right.
you can really, that's great. And where does that data go to? Who gets it?
So we are working, and maybe also, Laura, you can speak to this too, we're working, it does not go to our internal dashboard presently, but I think it does get pushed out to a DWR dashboard, and we're just working on getting good updated access. Is that accurate, Laura?
Yeah, you're right, Audra. So we are working, Laurel, on getting access. I mean, we have access to the DWR website. We just have to figure out how to transfer everything a little bit continuously, or at least every time we do QA/QC, we can upload the most recent data.
Okay, and could that access to that data be provided to GSA and TAC members? So, because I would just be curious to see what these look like over time. And I don't know how to do that.
We can work on that. I think Audra summarized a few of them in the presentation you did for the annual report, Audra, but we can give you the raw data. I think you want that, right, Laura?
Yeah, I just want to look at how they've changed between drought years and wet years and some of those kind of. But thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Laura. I appreciate it. And so that's right. And so here, because some of the sites, as you see in our full network, some of these sites both have continuous monitors. We also have some GSA continuous monitoring locations right down here, if you can see my mouse cursor, that was funded by the GSA and not the TSS grants. So we also have some additional locations that are either monitored by Ukiah Valley Wastewater Treatment Plant or are part of the network that MSC-RCD visits. Okay, and so again, we think this could be a pretty good candidate. I do have some additional hydrograph information if that would be of interest. We can look at that during discussion, but I'll keep moving forward and touch upon the last thing that we wanted to address, that sort of spawned from completing the annual report. And that was looking at Ukiah Valley 1, just zip through here, Ukiah Valley 1, the well location that's pretty proximal to Lake Mendocino, for which we saw an excursion below the minimum threshold for about a 3-month period of time based upon those measurements that Deborah is making in our groundwater elevation network. So this is an updated hydrograph. Last I showed you during annual report update time, last meeting, we had only just barely risen above the measurable objective, which was a good sign that recovery was taking place in response to the extreme precipitation we're experiencing here on the West Coast. But actually levels have risen even higher. I believe the last measurement here is for March. I don't have the April propagated here quite yet, but you can see we're already at pretty much a record high for this particular location when we look at how long, our measurement record. So we've had really rapid recovery. And so again, this is something we want to explore further. We want to try to understand, and Eric has been in contact with, let's see, is it Millview, and trying to understand their pumping patterns.
Yes, correct.
How that could be impacting this location. We also had Jeff visit this site and scope it out. It is very suitable for a continuous sensor, should that be something that the GSA would like to pursue, so that we can, keep close track on this moving to the future, even though we are in good shape right now.
Audra, before you move on, I think we
yes.
have some comments and questions on this item.
Yes,
Eric,
please.
did you have something first?
Yeah, just a really quick context for those who may not have been at the last TAC meeting when we talked about this.
Thank you.
The big thing, and great job, Laura and Audra. So the context behind this, right, was our GSP clearly states criteria around if we have minimum thresholds to a certain degree, it becomes an issue. Looking at this chart, it deviated below, it came back up. That is not an issue for the GSA. It's within the parameters that is outlined in the GSP. And the big thing that we were concerned about, just in general, just long-term thinking about this, is this monitoring well is near pumping wells, and those pumping wells turn on between May and October, especially during drought years. And that's why we saw this pretty significant decline. But as we saw from the rains that we had, it has a very quick recharge rate. And so the discussion came about where we want to look at, do we want to monitor this well with more continuous data other than beyond monthly? And so we can monitor the pumping effects during those times of drought, and also how quickly things recover in the area, so that over time, if we do see issues with pumping influence, we can then have the ability to respond quicker than on a monthly time scale. And so I have talked to Jared from Millview, and I am going to be talking to them a little bit more about it. And I did explain to him that we're simply curious to understand the pumping influence, so that way we can most adequately understand how quickly things decline during pumping, how quickly things recharge during rainfall events. And then that way we have a clear understanding of what's happening. So if we anticipate an issue, we can talk about it and we can address the issue proactively instead of in response to a potential several year occurrence where the levels are below the minimum threshold, which is when we would become more concerned.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to go to Don Seymour on Zoom. Don?
Yeah, I was just wondering offhand, do you have the dates for those 3 measurements that were below the minimum thresholds?
Let me see.
Approximate dates.
I can answer that. This is Deborah. Deborah
Thank
from the
you, Deborah.
RCD. I don't remember if it was August, September, October, or September, October, November, but it was the fall.
Thank you.
That sounds right. September, October, November, I think. Because this should be December right here. All right. Any
Sean?
further questions? Oh, sorry.
Deborah, did you have anything else?
I did in regards to UV 36. But I don't want to leave this.
Does anyone else have comment on UV1? Sean?
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting information, but for trying to measure static water level, having one inside potentially the cone of depression of a municipal pump just isn't really giving you data on what the groundwater level is doing. It's giving you data on the drawdown of somebody else's municipal well. And again, that's not like it could still be useful information, but for the characterization of the state of the general aquifer, I think we should honestly consider not using this site and finding something in that area that's outside the influence of a production well. And, you know, I just, you know, our wells fluctuate on a given day 40 feet while they're on, and that's not part of anything that needs to be an alarm because they come back in an hour. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
if that's what we're monitoring, that's not what we're supposed to be monitoring here.
Yeah, so a couple of aspects, if I may, Beth. So the first thing is that, yes, Deborah does everything she can when she goes out to take those measurements when it's static. And she's actually gone a couple times where she's gone back after pumping was done to try to get a representative measurement. And I think both static and pumping are both very important for two reasons. One, static, yes, gives you the representation of the aquifer, but as we know, pumping can have a significant influence, and over time, if it maintains below the minimum threshold, based on our criteria, which I think is over 60% of the wells have a minimum or below the minimum thresholds for a certain number of years. I mean, that's really important information. So I view it as being, we should not be removing this well. I don't think that would be necessarily something that I would recommend. I would say that having the best knowledge that we have on this well and understanding the influence of pumping then can inform how we're understanding the basin, how it is fluctuating with rainfall and pumping in this area, but then also making sure that if we are into a situation where we're starting to see declines for some reason and we're not getting the recovery we want to see, and then there's pumping on top of it, I mean, that's where things become a slippery slope, and we want to make sure we're proactive understanding that happening. And we can manage the situation before it becomes a bigger problem.
Okay, Laura, can we hear from you?
I have another
sorry.
comment. So I think that's important data together, but I don't think this one well will ever get you that information. And I think this is just recording noise from an adjacent facility. I think long nested series are how you get to what you're talking about. And this is just going to create some eye-catching thing that people who want to make a case for something that's not really indicative of what's actually happening. I think I understand the desire for the data you want. I don't think this one site is going to give you that. And I think if we want to get that, we should work with LWA or somebody else to give us a series of wells that will do that. But to me, you're just recording noise. You're not getting the data you want.
Thank you, Sean. Laura, do you have a response?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, Sean, when we selected this well is because we didn't have this last year of data. So it looked all like something that we could use in a GSP. And I see your point. My suggestion might be this doesn't need to be necessarily an RMP. And I agree with the point that maybe we can remove it as the RMP from the RMP, but we should keep monitoring because this type of data will be so critical for the model. So we want to see both sides and how data can be helpful in from different perspectives. So I see your suggestion about maybe not having this well as part of the official representative monitoring network, because it's true that it's kind of unpredictable if pumping goes on. At the same time, we want to keep collecting the data, at least for internal goals of understanding how this aquifer is really changing throughout the time.
So Laura, I'm hearing you say collect the data, but not include it as a monitoring point that would bring negative attention that Sean brought up. Sean, did you want to comment back on that?
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, I think this can provide data. It's just not providing the data that these long-term aquifer level things are supposed to be providing. I think it would be interesting to see like how big the cones of depression for municipal wells are, how deep they are, other things. That's not what these wells are for, right? And that's what this well is really monitoring. So to me, and look, I also understand Laura's point of like, we had to get going. We didn't know what these things were going to look like. We didn't have enough history. But this is something I saw in my former life all the time. You know, sometimes you pick a site without having any history or long-term database. And it's okay to go like, you know what, this site sucks for this. And to move on and pick a site that is more applicable. And if you find this site interesting and you want to learn other things about what's happening there, do that. But don't cling to it because it's what you put in your first report, even if it's not really yielding the kind of data that is what you were supposed to be tracking through this effort. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just like, for whatever reason, fall in love with this stupid monitoring site. It's just a hole in the ground that we picked blindly because we didn't have any better idea of what was happening there. You know, and if we really want to characterize what's happening with the static water level of the aquifer, which is really what we're supposed to be doing through these, this site looks like a loser to me. I'll stop beating my drum.
Stephen, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so I raised my hand, and I think most of this has been covered here. I don't know that this needs to be an RMP, but the data could be really helpful. One additional point I'll make is that continuous data, I think, will help resolve those things. So in terms of the timing of when that pumping stress in a municipal well is, you see it in this, observation well that's however far away, would be really helpful in characterizing aquifer properties. But I think you're only really going to get that through continuous data monitoring. So I don't know if that's on the table or not, but that would just be my recommendation. So thank you.
I would agree with that.
All right, thank you to all those commenters on that. I think we may have reached a compromise. Deborah, and then we'll go to Marlena.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little context. First of all, this was one of the original CASGEM monitoring wells, which was put online in 2014. At that point, the nearby municipal well actually didn't even exist, and then when it was drilled, it was not operating. So this is a relatively new development. The other thing, just point of reference, there are 4 nested wells there at different depths. I believe this is the only one that had such a dramatic change, but I just wanted to mention that as well.
They all echoed a similar pattern, though. But yeah, thank you, Deborah. That's absolutely true.
Thank you. Forgive my ignorance, but in respect to 9A, if there was an application within half a mile of that well, how or would you need that information to make a call on approving that well or not?
Could you repeat the number you used? Did you say
9A?
half a mile?
Yeah, that's just ballparking. Because I know how far those 2 wells are in general from each other.
So just to make sure I'm getting this in my head right, if someone wants to do an application, they submit it, and they want to site their well within a half a mile of those pumping wells.
Over there, yeah.
Yes, that would be a 9A, 9B thing that we would probably have to look at, but it depends on what proximity and other factors we ultimately land on as part of that process what we're trying to develop. But yeah, I mean that could beg the question of, is this a nearby well interference issue? Yes.
Great point, Marlena. Thank you. I just want to note we need to move along a little bit quicker on this so we can get through our agenda today. So Audra, I'm going to take it back to you. Thanks for pausing on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually is the bulk of what I wanted to share. We will hand it over for any further discussion or decision making, but we did want to just raise these possible suggestions and provide a status update after the conversation that we had about the annual report last TAC meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. So it sounds to me like, Eric, you might be working on a path forward to change the monitoring well location, but continue this data collection.
Yes, and also in response to that one well that is destroyed, we would consider replacing that with a different monitoring well, UV36. Is that right, Audra?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
correct.
And then that would be the replacement for the RMP that is no longer applicable.
Okay, great. Were there any further comments? Deborah?
I did want to mention something about UV36.
Yes,
That is a
please.
City of Ukiah well. So, and it's City Well number 9.
Which well is that?
Number 9, the one that is considered for the replacement well.
Okay.
And so I don't know if that's being continuously pumped or not. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Any further comments on
We'll
this
have to
item?
talk about that.
I'm not seeing any. Any public comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Audra and Laura. That was a very good presentation. Good discussion, everyone. Thank you. We're going to move on
Thank you.
to item number 7, water quality sampling. The TAC will review an overview from staff on anticipated water quality sampling that will take place in August 2024 and discuss. Eric, is that you?
Yes, it is. Going to share my screen really quick. So just really quick overview. This will be pretty short. We have done water quality monitoring recently, and that was specifically for nitrate and specific conductants. But there are other constituents that we outlined in our GSP that would be monitored every 3 years. And so we have another sampling event coming up scheduled for August. And so we'll be working towards doing that in the near future. And then we wouldn't do another sampling event until next fiscal year, where we would just do nitrate and specific conductants. And then on the next 3rd year, we would do this again. And the purpose for this frequency and whatnot is based on the data that we have and seeing the trends and not seeing any significant indicators for us to have to do it more frequently. And so we're sticking to this until we have data that suggests otherwise. Then we would obviously change course to make sure we're addressing any water quality issues that come up.
Any comments or questions? TAC members, public, anyone?
Yeah, I
Laurel?
have a question.
Yeah, please.
Eric, did you find any nitrates in any of the locations that you monitored? Or can you tell us what the levels were?
I do not have the information off the top of my head and what those were. I don't know if Deborah, do you have that?
We have the data, but I don't have it off the top of my head, but I could send it to you, Laurel, if you'd like, if that's okay.
Oh, that would be great if we could get it.
Sure,
Yes.
no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Please
Anyone
send it
else?
to me as well, Deborah. Please. Thank you.
Yes, if anyone wants that information, please let Eric know, and Deborah can get that to you. You can contact Eric through our website, GSA website. Okay, item number 8, rate and fee study. We're going to receive an update from Eric on the anticipated next steps to initiate a rate and fee study and discuss next steps.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. As mentioned, I already talked about a little bit about this, but the rate and fee study is going to be starting anytime now after we go to the board and get it approved. And the big pieces here are that there's 2 different proposition routes that can be done. One's a regulatory type fee. The other one is a property related fee. And so our rate and fee study consultant will be looking at these options and then going to the board and then basically getting a clear sense of direction of which route we would like to take based on the information we gather and which one seems like to be the most appropriate. There will be plenty of opportunity for the public to be engaged in this. We will be having a series of workshops through the process. And the other thing about this too is that we may be doing this in a year or in a 2-year time frame. So that's going to be ultimately a decision that the board will make. And we will be providing them a indication of what that will look like and what that means. And in general, it's tied around the August deadline that usually happens for if you need to put something on a tax bill or something like that. And so we'll be starting that in June. If we do a 1-year track, we'll be aiming to complete that by August of 2024. 2024. And then if we do that on a 2-year track, we would then be completing that by August 2025.
Thanks, Eric. TAC members, any comments or questions on the rate and fee study? Seeing none from TAC members, I'll go to Devin on Zoom.
Yes, hi, Devin Bohr, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Eric, quick question. Do you guys have an idea what schedule you might be doing the workshops on this year or early next, by chance?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
Do you have an estimate in terms of the timing for the workshops on the rate and fee study, like when you would be hosting those meetings?
I don't have a solid sense of like a exact date or a week, but I anticipate that workshops could start as early as August into the fall in 2023. Yeah, because the first part is data collection, assessing what we have, and then starting to do outreach around what we're doing, and then diving deeper into those details as we go.
Any follow-up, Devin?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. You know, August is going to be a little bit challenging. Just that's why I'm asking. We did end up being in harvest, August and October, and so just something to consider in terms of attendance and participation. I think it'll be important to kind of make some considerations there. The pairs obviously are hitting hard and heavy in July as well, so it's a challenge to start doing some of these things. So the sooner you guys have an idea, the better that we can hopefully get some decent participation.
Yeah. So we will be taking the harvest season and how busy that could be into consideration for trying to maximize the public attendance we have for outreach and workshops. Yep.
Thanks for that comment and question, Devin. Anything else on this item? Rate and fee study, item 8. Seeing none, item number 9, TAC meetings in fiscal year 2024. Eric?
So if we get the grant, we have a draft schedule that we submitted as part of the grant. Obviously, it's still a draft schedule. It could be changed. But the TAC can anticipate potentially increased meetings or longer meetings, one of the two. And that's because with the 2 projects we anticipate that we would get funded through the grant project, if we don't want to take on more than 2, it obviously depends on how much DWR offers in their preliminary award, and then the financial situation of how we want to manage that, which we've already been thinking about and planning for ahead. But with that, we could be having some very specific focus meetings on some of these projects as part of an existing TAC meeting schedule on a quarterly basis. But we might have the need to either increase that or to make those meetings longer. So I just wanted to give everyone just a heads up on the TAC that could be coming, and that this is the draft schedule. If you have any questions, feel free to bring it up to me. But the goal, obviously, right, is I do not want to burden the board or the TAC members with more than we can handle. So we will try to find the best medium road approach to balance the demands that we may have in terms of their meetings and addressing everything adequately without causing burnout. So just wanted to bring that up.
Since we've now got back on track with our timing for their meeting, I want to take a minute here and get some feedback from the TAC members, whether you would prefer more frequent TAC meetings in 2024, or would you prefer longer meetings in 2024? So let's start online with Laurel. Do you have a thought on that? And then I'll go to Dawn and James.
Is 2 hours not long enough? Is that what you're saying? Because it sure seems like it is.
Maybe a 3-hour with a 10-minute break in the middle or something?
If on a quarterly schedule, I think that could be possible. It just all depends on the level of effort that we see that we might need based on what we have going on. And then also how many projects we take on, and just anticipating the 2, I think 3 with a 10-minute break, 3-hour meetings, a 10-minute break on a quarterly basis should be sufficient. However, I think we need to be a little flexible on that based on the needs that we see come up.
Okay, Laurel, what do you think?
Well, I'd rather, of course, have fewer shorter meetings rather than.
I don't think that was an option
More
I
meetings.
presented, Laurel.
But if we have to do, I mean, a quarterly 3-hour meeting I could do. I just don't want to do that every month.
Yeah, okay. So Laurel's saying longer. Don, what do you think?
Yeah, I would also favor a longer meeting as needed.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Adam?
I'll go with longer meetings and less of them.
Javier?
Yeah, I'm good with whatever everybody wants to go with.
Okay. Sean? I don't think your mic was on, but you agreed with the general consensus. And Deborah, you want to make a comment on next year?
Oh, that's a prompt. I think either format is fine, and I think Beth is trying to prompt me to let everyone know, for those of you who don't know, this is my last meeting, I'm sorry to say. Yeah. Because I'm not going to be working for the RCD starting, I'll be leaving starting mid-June. So I'm really enjoyed being part of this process, but I will not be here at the next meeting.
Well, I think we should have weekly meetings, and they should be very long. We have lots of work to do. No, I think the longer meetings less frequently, if that works out for the schedule of items that come. Of course, we will have to consider there may be items that are a little more timely and be a little bit flexible. But Eric, I think you're doing a good job of sending out notices to the TAC members, particularly letting us know, reminding us when meetings are coming up, and making sure we get the information in time to review it for the meeting so we come prepared. I know we're all reading all the information before we come to the meeting. Okay, I think that would give you enough feedback. Any other comments on that? Anyone from the public have an opinion? They just can't live without sharing? Okay. Now, why we really came to this meeting today, item number 10, Vice Chair opportunity. So, do we have anyone who is interested before we nominate anyone? Is there anyone interested, or are we going to have to force someone to be the vice chair? Okay, that was Sean off mic volunteering. Come back on mic and volunteer so everyone believes me.
I'm volunteering.
Okay. Does anyone else have interest in being vice chair?
If I was staying here, I would, but I've heard I'm going to be replaced fairly soon.
Okay, you're out of here. Deborah's out of here. Okay, and I don't hear anyone from online getting excited, so I nominate Sean White as vice chair for the UV GSA TAC.
I second that.
Anyone oppose? Great, Sean, you are promoted to vice chair. Now I can take a meeting off occasionally, especially if they're going to be long ones. On to item, or do you have anything on that, Eric?
No.
Okay, great. All right. Item number 11 is consent items. I did talk to Eric prior to the meeting about this. I think we're going to hold off on the consent items to the next meeting. I found there's a little confusion whether on the agenda it says February 28th and on the minutes it says February 22nd, I believe. So that might be something to clear up. And then also the December 7th meetings were not in, minutes were not in the packet.
Yeah, so that was an error on my part.
That's fine. We can do it
did
next time.
approve. We did do consent for the December 7th minutes last meeting, I believe.
Oh, they've been approved?
Yeah, and so it's just for the February ones, but there's a couple things that we would like to address beforehand, so I'll roll those up to the next meeting. And I do apologize. I'm gonna make sure that we have these out faster, and then they're a little bit better of a summary and precision on language and accuracy on that next time.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. All right, now can you clarify, I know that we're recording the Zoom portion. Are these recordings being posted on the website or YouTube, available for the public and others to review?
Yes. So the county currently maintains the YouTube channel where the GSA has its own channel within their own channel themselves. And so you can find all board and TAC meetings, to my knowledge, on the County Mendocino YouTube channel. And so that has been updated recently. And one of the things I will be doing for the website is to be cross-referencing and linking that to our website. So then that way, If you don't know where to find it on the county website or the YouTube channel, you can access it directly from our webpage to find where those are at. So you can listen to any of the meetings we've had in the past if you would like to do that.
And I'm going to look to our esteemed colleague in the booth. Can you give me a thumbs up if you confirm that these are not only live streamed on YouTube, but recorded and available later for review? I'm seeing a thumbs up. That's fantastic. Okay, so, and yes, I had suggested to Eric, since we do record these meetings, it's much more entertaining to watch the meeting than to read the minutes. So if we can keep the minutes shorter and refer to the recording. I don't think, does anyone have an objection to that? If someone really likes reading and writing the long minutes, I suppose we could keep doing that. Okay, so we will postpone the consent item, whatever consent items we need for next meeting. Any other updates, comments, questions from the TAC members that we haven't addressed today? Anyone else leaving us? No? All right, thank goodness. Okay. Any other public comment? I'll take general public comment. Dominic, hey, how's it going? Yes, we need to add an agenda item on here for our DWR colleague. Dominic, go ahead.
Yeah, so is that working? So I don't really have too much of an update. It's just earlier you were talking about the implementation grant, and we'll have those out either at the end of this month or early next month. So that's all.
Preliminary award? You mean preliminary award? Preliminary award?
I can't say about who's awarded. I will say that we did get a lot more requests than I think it's about 200 million, and I think we had over $500 million requested of us. So there's definitely a lot of need. So hopefully the legislature sees that.
Great, thank you for that update, Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
While we're on that general topic, I did read that an additional, I think, 10 GSPs were approved on Friday, including Scott and Shasta. Just pointing out, we have not heard back, right? Correct?
Yeah, and my understanding is that the DWR is going to be doing it in batches, and so we should anticipate, hopefully in the near future, what Ukiah's GSP, if it's approved or needs revision. And I just want to also just caution, just because a GSP was approved in a similar region to us, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same for us. Every GSP in every basin is different, obviously, in terms of the review. So we need to, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but I'm optimistic, but we'll see what happens when it happens.
Okay, great. And last call for comments and questions. Future agenda items, anyone? Other than just adding DWR on the standing agenda?
Yeah, so future agenda items that you can anticipate for the August meeting will be adding an agenda item for DWR, also focusing more on the rate and fee study, because that's going to be something that we're going to be diving into more. We'll have an update on the Well County permitting process for the executive order compliance. And we will also be providing an update on the water quality monitoring and any other surface water and groundwater level monitoring that becomes applicable to discuss. And then the last thing that we'll also be focusing on, assuming I don't get other things that also come up in between then, because usually that's what happens, we will also be focusing a little bit on the grant, the projects that we are anticipating to be working on, and then what that preliminary schedule and what we anticipate will look like. To be tackling some of those critical path items at the TAC level, at the board level, and any workshops we anticipate we will be wanting to plan for over the next couple of years. And so that way, hopefully we have a decent understanding of what the future may look like and how we want to dive into that, and what we need to tackle over time for both the rate and fee study project and also the GSP updates project, which are the two we're anticipating.
Thank you, Eric. I would like to request that as we issue RFPs for various work, especially with the implementation grant money coming in, fingers crossed, that at the time we bring that to the board to issue the RFP, that we ask the board to establish an ad hoc committee at that time who will be the review panel. I know we've kind of had to patchwork it together in the past. I also like the idea of having each category of representation, a member either from the TAC or from the board, or potentially even a member of the public that is active, be appointed to that ad hoc, so we have full representation of our stakeholders. With that, anything else? If not, I will adjourn the meeting at 2:45 p.m. Look at that, we got out a little bit early. Well done, everybody. I want to thank all of the TAC members and all of the staff, all of our consultants that arrived, and all of the wonderful stakeholders who are listening in today. Tune in next time in August.